To finish up, there will be like a few more slides. So we have like the goal. What is the goal of the public participation program? So as a summary, it's like to inform the public, to have like a procedural public participation process, like public hearings. It could be that we are trying to solve a problem in a collaborative manner, or that we are trying to develop agreements, and there's like different ways that you might approach that, just depending what is the goal. So why you want to conduct a participation program? So maybe you are required, and you need to fulfill a regulatory requirement. Maybe something related to the environmental impact statement that is required by the federal government. This doesn't mean that you should not try to, or that you should try just to do things because they are requirements. Many times you can exceed what are the requirements of something and do more participation that is needed, or maybe some other agency, some other city might thought that participation wasn't needed, but you want, based on your own community and the issues that you have there, maybe you want to say, yes, we are going to do a public participation process. But this is a common question the planner will always ask: is it required? Because if it's required, I have to do it. You might always go beyond, so maybe the requirements from the federal government in order to disburse some of the community development block grants for disaster recovery is that you do a public hearing, and that's it. But maybe you want to do like a survey, you want to do lots of meetings with stakeholders. Maybe you are doing different ways more than the public hearing, but you do want to know that what are the requirements, and the federal requirement says, well, it is a public hearing. The public obviously, and activists and advocates will hope for a lot more, and they might even fight with you about we don't want you to do only a public hearing, we want to be heard. And then it's always a good idea to know your community and always try to do more participation if the issue is very important, like something like distributing the CDBG DR funds. You don't want to do the minimum, but again, you want to know what are the requirements and fulfill those requirements. You can just try to do a participation program because you want to develop your working relationships with different stakeholders and members of the public. It will result in better decision making and in good decisions. So you might want to do it because of that. With the Concord Open Station, after the alternatives, we ended up with something so much better, precisely because a lot of minds together just think better, and planner doesn't have all the knowledge. And public participation is the ability to be able to have some other knowledge and share the knowledge collectively. The other thing that we have talked about before, but it was mentioned again, is that if you know that something is controversial and people are going to come and derail the whole process, then if your implementation will be threatened because you didn't do X, Y, or Z, the idea is that you will create a decent public participation process that will again help you with the implementation. And the public must be involved in implementation, so commitment to the decision by the public is essential. Chapter ends with thinking about what is your purpose of conducting public participation and how this drives the selection of the program that you are going to make. So the author says, if the goal is to have a better informed public, it may be more appropriate to conduct a public information program. And if the goal is to strictly to fulfill requirements, then you might implement a minimal program. But of course, if the issue is controversial, then participation is needed in order to have credibility. The public can really tell when you are going just through the motions in order just to fulfill requirements. If the goal is to give public the opportunity to be heard before a final decision is made, so it may be appropriate to do like a public participation program that is just satisfies the procedural requirements, like the public hearing. But if you need support or informed concerns of a decision, it is usually very necessary that you do a collaborative solving program, solving approach, like in the case of the Concord Neural Open Station. So at the end, there was like a consensus building process with the public really having genuine influence in the decision. Even though at the end who made the decision, it was like the who had the ability to make decisions is the agency and the decision makers, right? But everybody was on board with like making or choosing one of those alternatives to move forward to the board. If no decision can be made until actually like all the there's buy-in from the entire substance of the decision, then a situation requires that you get an agreement. So this is a different situation where it says like if you have like a case in where the agency, maybe like a particular stakeholder or group of stakeholders or residents in a neighborhood, if they actually don't get the buy-in on this, you might want to get an agreement. So usually full agreements, it requires a negotiation process. So it will have like very well-defined parties, and people will make like commitments. So here the situation happens much less, but it's more like a legal procedure in where there will be a negotiation between these like two different parties that have conflicting interests. And you might see this more with like regional planning, that maybe the town A wants to put industry in their town, but that potentially could contaminate the water on town B. So in this case, you might need a negotiation process, because you have like two places that have contradictory opinions of what it should be done, and one affects each other. There's obviously a clear defined parties. So in this case, you will need a negotiation. But the author ends with this thought: so above all, it is essential to establish some clear expectations within your organization and with the public about what kind of participation is being provided. The biggest problems arise when the public expects like a higher level of involvement than the organization is really willing to consider. Oftentimes because it's trying just to do what is required and what is procedural. The most important remedy for the organization is to be clear with the public about what is the level of involvement that they actually like are seeking.